Hi, everyone. I hope you all can hear me out there. Thanks for joining us today at the Alliance of Business Lawyers webinar on the U.S. presidential election. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Ruddy. I'm president of the Alliance of Business Lawyers. I'm based in Washington, D.C., the law firm of Ruddy Gregory. And a little bit about the network for those of you that don't have a lot of familiarity with it. We are a international law firm network of business law firms, small to medium business size law firms located around the world in approximately 35 countries. We work together. We have a very close collegial relationship, each of the firms, working together to assist our clients internationally. And that includes hosting events like what we're having today in this webinar to give our participants insight into the U.S. presidential election. And the network is fortunate to have a few experts on politics, U.S. politics, two of which are joining us here today. I'll give their full bios a little bit later, but I'll just introduce them briefly. One is Pat McCarty. Pat McCarty is an attorney here at this law firm at Ruddy Gregory in Washington, D.C. Specializing, he's a lobbyist handling government and regulatory affairs. And the other is Joe Klock. Joe is with Roscoe Klock, Perez and Nieto out of Miami, Florida, and has even litigated in some political matters as well. And we'll get to that later. So I'm gonna do a little Q&A with our two experts here today. And then we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end, about 10 minutes at the end, in order to have people go ahead and ask them some questions. So with that having been said, I'll say first, Pat, good morning to you, and Joe, good morning to you as well. You guys are hearing me okay, I trust. And Pat, yes, you're okay, good. Your quick bio, and then I'll go ahead and zing you with the first question. But so everyone knows, Pat has 25 years in political experience working here in Washington, D.C. Pat's worked in the United States Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives. He helped craft the language, which was Dodd-Frank, which was a major financial overhaul after the 2008 financial crisis. He's worked as well at the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which regulates the U.S. derivatives markets, where he was general counsel for a period of time. He's worked at trade associations here in Washington, D.C., including the Hedge Fund Association. He's also worked at the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, which regulates our securities markets. So Pat is well-versed in politics. He's currently a registered lobbyist, which is a fancy way of saying you give him a brown bag of cash, and he hopes to help make some regulatory changes in your favor. Pat, I'll just put it out there. It's been interesting. Donald Trump, no matter where you stand politically, makes it interesting. He was in the hospital with coronavirus. He's left the hospital. After the first debate, there was a Wall Street Journal NBC poll that has that has Joe Biden up 14 points over President Trump currently. I know it's early on. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time giving our personal opinions, I know, but best guess, a 14-point lead 1 month out from our election. Biden must be feeling good. Is it a done deal, or what are your thoughts?
Mark, thank you for having me. I appreciate being asked on for this webinar. I'll be really direct and blunt. I think Joe Biden wins, and I think it's a Democratic wave. And it may be the case that things tighten up a little between now and the end of November 3rd, but I'm fully convinced that we're going to see the Democrats, Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris, win. And I think they're going to expand their majority in the House significantly, and there's a really good chance that they take the Senate. So that's where I am on that.
Wow. Okay. All right. Very good. So appreciate the input there. And then Joe, I'll go ahead and turn it to you. I'm not going to ask you to maybe pontificate on the election outcome unless you're so inclined. But I will say by introduction, so that everybody knows, Joe, your legal career has been very impressive. You're primarily a litigator, having done a variety of litigation over the years. You've served on the board of companies, you advise corporate CEOs and things of that nature. But with respect to where we are here today, you actually had 2 successful arguments in the U.S. Supreme Court in the Bush v. Gore case in the 2000, which everyone I think knows, or maybe we'll go ahead and tell them, Florida was ground zero for the 2000 presidential election. It's impressive that you did that. So Joe, Pat told us what he thinks on the presidential election itself. So what about there are other races involved here? I think there's the U.S. Senate, right? And I think right now the Republicans have like a 3-seat majority in the Senate. They're trying to hold on there. How important is the U.S. Republicans holding on to the Senate going to be going forward?
I think that's kind of up in the air. The polls demonstrated that they couldn't figure out what was going to happen in 2016. The contacts with different people I have is that people that support Trump, unless they have a very good fire suppression system in their commercial establishments, don't talk about it a lot. Because of course, the Democrats, who are all in favor of free speech and this, that, and the other thing, also apparently include torching businesses, killing police officers, and that kind of thing. And other people are a little bit shyer about that. So if you ask me, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the Senate. But all I know is that it's going to be a very interesting time for our country, no matter what happens. This is one of the few times that I can ever remember that, they always say there's things you don't discuss. Well, one of the things you don't discuss at all now is politics. People in families, I'm an Irish Catholic. I've been blessed with 7 sisters, and 3 of them are card-carrying socialists, and the other ones tend to be more conservative. But we can't discuss politics in the house at all if we get together. Our children are like equally divided the same way. In our law firm, people are more sensible. My managing partner, Ramon Rasco, is here, and he, I think, would agree with me. I think we have more people. I'm a Democrat, but I've been to college, so I don't vote that way a whole lot.
Okay. Well, I think with McCarty and Ruddy doing the webinar with you, we didn't mean to stack it. Everyone should know with Irish Americans, but it sounds like it's come out that way. So Pat, Joe enlightened us a little bit on his thoughts, and just so our larger group knows, which, in case they're not aware, we have the presidential race. Then we have the United States House, and we have the United States Senate, and all of them are essentially up for grabs, or seats are up for grabs. We have right now we have a Republican president, we have a Republican Senate, and we have a U.S. House, which is controlled by the Democrats. Pat, is that still going to be the case, do you think, or what's going to happen with the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives?
Like I said earlier, Mark, I think that the House, which is controlled by the Democrats right now, you'll actually see more Democrats being elected to the House, so that they will have a larger majority going forward. They already run things in the House with Speaker Pelosi. The Senate, I think it's a 50-50 shot right now. It could actually swing to the Democrats. It just depends upon kind of how the top of the ticket goes and whether a wave develops or not. But the Republicans could maintain control. If that happens, if the Republicans maintain control, then and Biden gets in, then in fact, I think that'll frustrate an awful lot of proposals that Biden and the House Democrats want to push forward, because the Republicans disagree with higher taxes and a lot of the things that Joe was just talking about in terms of some of the social issues.
Okay. So, Joe, I'll turn it to you then in terms of these issues that we started talking about taxes a little bit. what is going to happen here possibly if we have a Biden presidency, if we have if the Democrats sweep and we now have Democrat Senate, Democrat House, Democrat presidency? What could happen if we're Democrats, or what do you think we're going to happen if if Trump's able to pull out the day, and maybe we have a split there with the House being Democrats and the Senate's being Republicans? So tax policy, Joe, your thoughts, please.
The United States has the highest, or had the highest, corporate tax rate anywhere in the world, I believe, and that was modified. All that happens when you raise taxes is you modify people's behavior, and people will simply move. They'll simply move their businesses outside the United States again, and then the Democrats will try to figure out all sorts of clever ways of sucking that income back in, but they won't find it. And so the fact of the matter is that it's going to be a very interesting world for lawyers. I think Patrick and I both agree as far as that's concerned. If the Democrats maintain control of the Senate, then and we can get through the election with deciding who actually won without having to go through one of the mechanisms that have the House and the Senate deciding the president and vice president, which interestingly, under our system, the vice president would be elected by the Senate and the president would be elected by the House. So you would have, in the god-awful circumstance of the election having to be determined that way and not by the vote, you could have Joe Biden as president and Mike Pence supposedly as vice president. Then once you get into the Senate, then of course comes the question of confirming cabinet positions, which just might not get confirmed very quickly, and confirming judges, which will get done even slower. If the Democrats sweep everything, they may try to get rid of the filibuster rule in the Senate, but I think there are a sufficient number of conservative thinking Democrats that would not want that to be done. I think they all at this point in time think that what was done by the previous majority leader in terms of getting rid of the filibuster rule and that kind of thing for judges led to the situation we have with the Supreme Court, which is one vote away from being solidly conservative. So I think it'll be a mess.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to come back to some of that larger mess and that you brought up in a second, but I think I'll even ask Pat, if I can, you the same question. And, taxes, and Trump gave this country a very big, beautiful tax cut, I think as he called it. There's a lot of criticism behind it that it was more beneficial, for the wealthy. With COVID, in the way our government has spent money, I think a lot of people are saying, how are we going to pay for it unless we don't increase taxes? So what are your thoughts, short form, on taxes going forward here, and especially how it's relevant to international corporations?
I think it's a foregone conclusion that the Democratic House will actually move forward with a big tax bill next year. And in fact, they will probably raise rates on corporations as well as on individuals, especially the millionaire tax, I think, is something that's going to come along. I think that's something which the Democratic House will do regardless of whether Trump remains the president or not. If Joe Biden's the president, he has pretty much indicated that he will support a new tax bill. And I think it's undeniable that that's going to happen. It won't go quickly, and there'll be a lot of yelling and screaming, but I assume that the first part of next year, you're going to see the House of Representatives and the House Ways and Means Committee working on a very large tax bill that'll undo a lot of the things that, in fact, President Trump's tax cut did. And I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, it's all but agreed. I think that's where they're going to go at the beginning of next year.
Okay. All right. Joe, how about trade policy? Trump was very much protectionist. He ran on renegotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is the trade agreement between Canada and Mexico, for our participants in case they're not aware. You know, he's been very hard on China at times. We've gotten into a trade war somewhat with China. He's also been rough on Canada and the EU, even when it comes to trade. So Joe Biden has always proven to be a blue collar Joe, I think is his nickname. He always says he's there for the working man in America. Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen with international trade policy based on either variable, Trump as president or Biden as president?
Well, if Trump remains president, I think you'll see a continuation of the current policies. I and a bunch of other people in this firm do a lot of pro bono work, okay, primarily for African American and Black Americans. Consequently, my attitude, for instance, towards immigration is unless there are jobs where we can't get Americans to do it, I don't want to open up the borders, because every time you open up the borders, you impact poor people. As far as tariffs are concerned, I'm perfectly happy to pay more money for goods if that results in more American jobs. And of course, Joe Biden is now talking about buying America and this, that, and the other thing. That guy has been a tool of the Chinese for 40 years. His son has done very well in terms of his talents. I mean, there are very few people who suffer from substance abuse that sit on big boards and basically are paid large retaining fees by other organizations. So but I do think, for instance, I believe that Mr. Biden's an honest guy. But like so many politicians, he has the inability to keep his children from putting their face in the trough, and Hunter has put his face in the trough quite a bit. There's no reason to think Biden is get any tougher on China than he has been, and he has never been tough on China.
Okay. So, Pat, how about you? What do you think about trade policy? Are we going to stay protectionist under both presidents? Is there going to be maybe a more liberal opening of trade policy internationally? What are your expectations?
It's something tells me that it depends upon the particular country. If Joe Biden becomes president, I think that he, as Joe just said, he's pretty much considered a blue collar guy who wants to basically support jobs in the United States. Quite frankly, I think Senator Schumer and others actually would push to remain hard on China. And I think that that's where Joe will go. I think he'll have much harder time staying tough on or putting tariffs on our friends like Canada or the EU. And I think he will probably try to figure a middle ground so that he's not necessarily hard on our friends, but remains somewhat hard on sort of the bad guys, China, North Korea, others. He's going to basically try to sort of find a nuanced approach, which is not going to be the hard line that President Trump has had.
So how about the workers then? I mean, so our friends, we like our friends, we're going to cut tariffs on our friends and then screw our workers then? That's okay because they're our friends?
Joe, that's exactly the point, is that I think you're right, that in fact you have to be, you have to say, listen, it's about U.S. jobs versus basically jobs that are going to other countries. And to the extent that Canada or the EU is basically doing unfair trade. I mean, the term fair trade is something that gets kicked around all the time, and competition. But the thing is, it seems like our leaders in the past have pretty much bent over backwards to accommodate foreign countries who want to export to the United States to the detriment of U.S. workers. And I would think that it probably makes a lot of sense to say, we got to be tough on this stuff to make sure that the U.S. economy and U.S. citizens have good paying jobs. So I agree with you on that.
Because I think, Pat, I concur with what you're saying. From the time I was young, the strength of this country has always been the strength of the middle class. Joe Sixpack, that all kinds of people that in neighborhoods that I grew up in, where dad went off to work and he had an industrial job or something like that. And he supported his family. His wife didn't have to work, took care of the kids at home and that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is now that I don't, when you talk about Trump as being a Republican, he's more of a populist, okay? That's the reason why he's had trouble sometimes getting stuff through the Senate, because, a lot of the Republicans are, let them eat cake approach to economics. But I think that at the end of the day, we just have to decide our country will be severely hurt if our middle class is destroyed. And our middle class is having a very hard time of it at this point in time. Very hard time of it.
So Joe, let me ask you that then. After they said the issue with the 2016 election, the working man, as you know, normally votes Democrat. And the criticism of Hillary Clinton is she forgot about middle America. Literally, the Democrats went for the wealthy elite Democrats on the East Coast, and they would just fly over the United States and the West Coast, and they forgot about, out in California, and they forgot about everybody in between. And that Trump was able to hit a responsive chord with those people. Is that lessons learned? Is that, mistakes learned, do you think, for this election? And it's a two-part question. That's one. Two, is that going to be the deciding factor in this election? Often our elections, despite the fact that we're 50 states and, we like to say we're so diverse, it comes down to a handful of people in a handful of states. Ohio, the experts, just so our participants know, the experts almost can chart everything out and say, this state's going to go this way, this state's going to go this way. The variable is 3% of the voters who are, I'll make it up, white working class in Michigan and Ohio. And that's the variable that's going to decide this election. So is the variable, again, middle class working America, and then what states or what should we be looking at come election day to really decide this presidential election? Joe?
I think the factor that you have to consider that messes all of that up is the female vote. And the things that, like for instance, is I think that Pat will agree with me. One of the things you learn as a litigation lawyer is the days of spraying testosterone around the courtroom are no longer in vogue. Female judges don't like that stuff. And so it has caused lawyers to modify their behavior inside the courtroom. I think that there are a lot of women who find the president's approach to things to be vulgar, and I can certainly understand that. It's just the way the man is. But the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, they have to decide what it is they want to vote on. How important the law and order thing is going to make a difference. How important the jobs thing is going to make a difference. And I think the big surprise for the Democrats is going to be they are assuming that they are going to get the African-American vote in a big way, and I don't think they are. The contacts that I have in the community, they say, well, we're not saying anything about it, but we're not voting for Joe Biden. We're not voting for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a big negative, as I see it, among African-American men. As far as women are concerned, I don't know.
Okay, thanks. So I'll say summarize it a little bit, in this, historically African-American voters in the United States have voted Democrat. Kamala Harris is a senator from California who is half African-American woman. And I'm guessing the Democrats thought that would be an attractive draw in securing that vote. But sounds like you don't think that's the case, Joe. Pat, what do you think about this? So, I guess kind of same questions. Who's going to decide this election, and where are they coming from, type thing?
Well, I think it's the number of people who you would call independents is a small and diminishing number. But I think it's a very small number of people, as you pointed out earlier, Mark. I think everybody's saying that there's some certain swing states and there's a certain small group of people who are undecided, and I think that's true. I think that what you've got going on here is the fact that I think a lot of people who voted for Trump in 2016 have Trump fatigue. As Joe was pointing out earlier, a lot of women think that the president is very vulgar on things. I would say that he doesn't act particularly presidential at times. And I think the first debate showed that to us. I think it's going to be an interesting thing because in 2016, I think there were an awful lot of people who voted for Trump because they didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. And for a variety of reasons. But the thing is that I think that's going to be switched around this time around. I think there are going to be a lot of people who are tired of President Trump and the invective. And I think they're going to vote for Joe Biden when it comes down to, gee, which one do I like? And I think that's where you're going to see actually the change occur. It's not going to be necessarily that all these people love Joe Biden. I think there's going to be an awful lot of people who vote against President Trump. He's got no doubt about it. He's got a lot of strong supporters, people who will never abandon him. But I think that the people who put him in office, the people on the margins who decided to give him a shot, are a little upset with him. And I think that's the reason why I expect there to be a Democratic wave.
You see, I think one of the factors also, Biden's talking about how he's going to reach out and represent all the people. That's a bunch of crap. All politicians say that before they get in office. And then once they get in office, they kowtow to their normal, their normal support groups. He's not going to reach out to anybody. Okay. You have Nancy Pelosi, who will say anything one day and say something completely contradictory the next day. Sometimes the same day, different things she has to say. And so the fact of the matter is that, to the victor go the spoils, and that's what they're going to try to do. And I just don't buy any of this reaching out business because Joe Biden doesn't have anything to offer to small business people. He doesn't have anything to offer to the working man. You say Joe Biden is the working man's guy? Well, what's he done for them in the last 47 years? Nothing. How can a guy who's supposedly a man of the people allow his son to run around the world basically taking just large amounts of cash and stuffing it in his pocket? It's embarrassing. What's more embarrassing, what he does or what the president does? I'm more embarrassed by what Biden does because he doesn't, he's very loyal to his family. And they in the debate, they raise an issue with respect to Hunter Biden, and he tears up and starts talking about Beau. The issue wasn't about Beau Biden. He was a hero. He was a wonderful politician. He was a great leader, but his brother is a common thief, and his father has let him do it. And so if that's for the working man, it's okay with me. I don't think so.
So, Joe, it sounds like you'll never vote for Hunter Biden if he runs for office. That's the takeaway I'm getting from this. Is that the case? Okay.
Yes, it probably would be hard to. Yes.
Okay. And it sounds like you did not get a baby gift for Hunter Biden and his pregnant stripper girlfriend as well. Is that the case as well?
Well, no.
I'm freezing up here. Hello.
Yes. No, I don't think that I'd be inclined to do that. But just the issue is whether or not there is going to be any change in terms of national leadership, and there isn't. One of the things, like for instance, with this election coming up, I'm going to have nothing to do with any of the litigation involved in that if I reasonably can. Because one of the things I learned in 2016 is that you don't want to get between a lawyer and a TV camera unless you're willing to run the risk of having a leg broken as they run across you. Everything about that is them, posturing, what they're going to do, what they're not going to do, and that kind of thing. One of the strengths in 2016, I didn't represent Bush. I represented our Secretary of State, and she made a decision that she was only going to have one law firm represent her in every court in every matter. And that was a decision that Gore did not have, and I think that's one of the reasons that cost him the election.
Okay, so and we're on all over the board a little bit, but I'm going to go to that now, Joe, and that's I'm going to say your area or an area you clearly have experience in. There's been some conversations already, and to me it seems like since 2000 it's become the norm, and that's contested election. Donald Trump has already said there's going to be a lot of mail-in balloting because of COVID. A lot of people will not be going to the polls that day. They're going to mail in early. There's been questions about the ability of our U.S. Postal Service to handle mail-in balloting, and whether it's valid questioning or not. Politicians are putting it out there. And there's discussions already about contesting this election, even though we're not even at election day, which to me as an individual is concerning. Joe, is this going to be a contested election? If so, is this going to have a longer term impact, or is this something that's going to go away? I know I'm asking you to speculate some, but for our international viewers who wake up in the morning after the U.S. presidential election, are they going to see something on TV, and how serious might it be?
I don't think that they're going to. I think there's a good chance they're not going to have a winner on election night. The problem is not mail-in ballots. If somebody has requested a ballot and a ballot has been sent out to them, there's not a problem there. There's no fraud there. But when you have a situation where ballots are being mailed out en masse, and in most instances, the envelope that goes back is franked, so unless somebody makes a decision that they are going to postmark ballots when they come in, there is great opportunity for fraud. One of the areas that we've had continuing litigation in Florida is people collecting ballots and bringing them all in at one time. What's going to happen is these people are going to start, examining signatures on ballots. I was showing somebody the signature I had when I graduated from high school and college compared to the signature I have now, and even back a couple of years. I don't know how they're going to make these kinds of decisions. But what's going to happen is, I'm sure some, with all due respect to the Chief Justice, what we would call Obama judges are going to decide that people can come into court and say, oh yeah, that's my signature. Well, you can't do that. You have to be able to figure out on some sort of objective way. So they're going to have to postmark ballots, and then we're just going to have to see how it comes out. But the problem is not ballots. The quality is unsolicited ballots. But let me make this one last point. For the most part, it may not make a difference. It doesn't matter under our system whether Biden wins California by 1 million votes or 5 million votes, makes no difference, or New York or Illinois, okay? Because we deal with this electoral college system. But the problem is the toss-up states and what the impact would be there if this mass voting or the mass mailing takes place, which I haven't really seen happen yet.
Okay. Pat, how about you? Are we going to see a contested election? And is it something that is just going to, go away? It's going to be a quick fluff up in a silly challenge, or is this going to be a longer term issue?
I don't think it's going to be a contested election. It could be, as Joe points out, the amount of I guess, mail-in ballots and things like that, and whether you need to have a witness signature on it as well. All those things can confuse it. But I think we've had mail-in ballots and early voting for decades here in the United States. And it's significantly more limited than what's going on this year. I'll give you that. And I think the thing is, it's going to create some problems. I think if you think about it from a macro point of view, though, if this is a Democratic wave, which I think it's going to be, I don't think there's going to be that much to dispute. It may be that you don't know the next morning. In fact, actually, I'm a political junkie. I love to stay up on election night and watch the returns come in. And as you see what happens as the polls close on the East Coast and then the center of the country and then beginning on the West Coast, it's really kind of neat. I mean, 2:00 in the morning and you're still watching what's going on in terms of Washington State and California and Oregon. Although I think they're clearly going to vote for the Democrat on the left coast. I just think that what you need to do is you got to think, okay, it's a matter of degree. If this is a very close election, and we're talking about like the same thing that happened in 2000 that Joe was part of the litigation on, in Gore versus Bush, yeah, there's going to be problems. I don't think it's going to be really close. That's my view, and so I don't think that it's going to be that much of an issue.
But if I may, the issue, Pat, is not mail-in ballots. The issue is unsolicited ballots. They're sent out to lists of voters, and that is not the way it's been done for a long time. Are you suggesting it is?
Agree? No, I agree with you. I understand. That's how I said it. It's been expanded dramatically.
But and then the other thing is, of course, it's our media is so absolutely divided. I mean, you really can't watch the news. You know, I mean, the only reason to watch the news is the hope that there'll be, you know, a wardrobe malfunction on one of the stations. Otherwise, there's no reason to watch it at all because you know what they're going to say before they say it, you know. And so if you watch Fox, you know what they're going to say. If you watch CNN, you know what they're saying. If you have the misfortune of watching MSNBC, presumably you know what they're going to say. But the fact of the matter is that our media is the same way.
Okay. And listen, we have a few questions coming in, and I want to get to those questions. I appreciate the people that are asking the questions in a few minutes. And I'm sorry if we've moved all over some, and I'm going to come back to some policy issues, but I'm going to ask one more business question if I can. And, you know, originally, well, it's been an interesting year. The U.S. economy, like most world economies, did this. We have rallied back, unbelievably so, low interest rates, whatever the reason is. Donald Trump takes credit for the most amazing American economy ever. We were hearing that if Donald Trump is reelected president, it's great for the U.S. stock market. And Biden was going to take 5 to 10% off the S&P 500, the index that's the 500 major companies in the U.S. In the past 24 to 48 hours, we're seeing the stock market rising, and they're saying this is because Joe Biden is going to be president. There's going to be some consistency, and which is a total turn. And you know, it seems like that's Wall Street switching their tune. Is Joe Biden going to be great for this U.S. stock market? Joe, is Biden better for the U.S. stock market, or do we want gridlock here, where, you know, it doesn't matter who's president as long as we have the U.S. Senate or House run by someone else? So succinctly, Joe, your thoughts on that, and then I'll ask Pat the same.
Biden is very strongly supported by Wall Street. All of the reports show that that's the case, and those guys, you know what they do today doesn't have any impact on what they do tomorrow. And if the stock market crashes after the election, big deal. They'll just make money, you know, on shorts. I mean, they don't care. They care about the country. They care about the working man. Give me a break. The only thing they care about is whether or not they can maintain their houses, you know, in Maine and Newport News during the summer. So I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know. I hope that you're right, and I hope that there's only a temporary dip. But to suggest that Democrats that have never done the kinds of things you need to do to protect the working man's job are going to change their tune, I don't think so. They're going to support the people who put money in their pockets.
And Joe, as a lawyer who mostly represents wealthy people on Wall Street, I hope that they have the money to fund their vacation homes and to pay their legal bills as well. I'll just get my position clear on that. Pat, your thoughts on the U.S. stock market going forward?
U.S. stock market, first and foremost, they don't like uncertainty. And so they would prefer to have a clear answer one way or another on November 3rd or November 4th about who won and who, so they can start planning. One reason why the stock market is so high right now, at least a couple of reasons, would be one, throwing $4 trillion at the economy by the U.S. Congress. Two, zero interest rates by the Federal Reserve and all manner of support programs in terms of buying assets like bonds and ETFs and things like that. Three, the thing is, I think one of the reasons why you've seen the market kind of like going up a little higher is that they've been teased into believing that Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin are going to basically cut a deal on another stimulus bill that will be somewhere between 1.5 trillion and 2.2 trillion. And that's probably going to happen. You saw that our friend, the president, actually has been tweeting, go ahead and do it. You know, he wants to see a new stimulus bill passed so that, in fact, it will help the economy stay up. All that being said, I think the thing is that, you know, I don't think that Biden necessarily takes the top off the market. I think he's going to basically have a tax bill. He's also going to have he's going to be pushing for an infrastructure program. So that's going to actually mean a lot more jobs. I kind of think that there's going to be a period of time where you're going to have to sort of sort out the pluses and the minuses from what Biden is going to propose. And I think the thing is that the Wall Street and others will adjust. They will always make money, and they're going to be fine with whomever is the president, whether it's a second term with Trump or it's a first term with Biden.
Okay, so I'm going to pose to you both just one more question, and then I'll turn to the questions we're getting from our participants. And Joe, I'll start with you. You can talk about anything you want except Hunter Biden. But what I will ask you is what did we not cover here today that you feel is pertinent, relevant to our audience in terms of international business, international trade, something that they would want to know going forward coming out of this election? Anything that you think I didn't cover that you want to give to them? Words of wisdom, please.
Well, I think Pat and I would both agree that this is going to be a very good environment for lawyers, no matter what happens in the election. As far as issues inside the country are concerned, we have to get a handle on what the Democrats refer to as peaceful demonstrations, because, there are some people that don't consider burning buildings down to be peaceful, or shooting police officers or that kind of thing. And the Democrats won't say anything against that. The other issue that I think we have in this election coming up is that we really don't know what Joe Biden thinks, because they don't let him say anything. And since they don't let him say anything, everything that he says is something that's been pre-printed and put onto a teleprompter. So we really don't know what's going to happen. If you say to me, do I feel comfortable if Joe Biden ended up being president? I wouldn't be happy about it, but it wouldn't cause me to jump off a bridge. If Kamala Harris is president of the United States, then we're going to have to see how well I do jumping off bridges, because the woman has no borders in terms of her attitude towards things. And that makes a big difference.
Let me jump in there, Pat, before you answer the question. Joe Biden, 78, I think he is, if I'm not mistaken. There's been questions about his cognitive abilities. I would think he's going to be 4 years, a one and done guy here. So, Joe, I mean, do you think if Joe Biden wins, Kamala Harris is going to be the candidate 4 years from now? True or false?
If Biden is elected and if he can serve for 4 years, she might well be the candidate. But as you know, in politics, the only thing that's important is whether someone thinks they can win. My concern is that if Biden is elected, we don't really know, what is going on upstairs with the man. We do know that he has been a loyal public servant all these years, but he has always towed the party line. And the party line has not been pro-worker. That was the reason why Trump won. So the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, we're just going to have to see how this thing turns out. But Kamala Harris as president, I think, would be a disaster. Joe Biden as president is not a disaster.
Okay. So, Pat, I'll circle it back to you. Major item our participants would like maybe to hear about, if any, that we didn't cover briefly. And then, are we 4 years with Joe Biden if he wins?
Like I mentioned earlier, I think that you're going to see a infrastructure bill coming along in the upcoming Congress, along with a tax bill, along with something on healthcare, Obamacare being redone. So there's going to be a lot of activity. One thing I would mention to people who want to do business in the United States is that, in fact, while the legislature is busy, it's important to have people in there talking to the ones who are making the decisions about how to do stuff. So that's kind of my pitch for business is basically, listen, if you're just on the sidelines and watching, you get whatever you deserve by not being involved. There's going to be a lot of decisions that are made, and I think the thing is that they're going to try to pump the U.S. economy and try to make sure that people have jobs. So that's the reason why I think you're going to see an infrastructure bill, which people have been talking about for the last 10 years. We need one. And I think it's going to happen. I think that's going to be a very, very, very good thing for the economy overall.
But Pat, isn't it I'm sorry.
What was your second part there, Mark?
Joe Biden, if he wins, he's 4 years and done?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's done in 4 years. And I think I agree with Joe on this in terms of, I'm not sure that Kamala gets the nomination after Joe. I think a lot of it depends upon, there's going to be other people who want to jump in there. And so I'm not sure that she is going to be handed the nomination. There's going to be a lot of other people who are aggressive and who want to basically, take that opportunity. And I think that's what's going to happen.
I agree with Pat on that.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go now to some questions that we've been asked. One is what is the reasons for the loss of popularity of Donald Trump apart from COVID? Pat, you want to go first? Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to go first. I think, as I said before, that there's this Trump fatigue thing. I mean, a week doesn't go by when there's something that the president says that's a little, over the top. I mean, he's had a variety of things following him. You saw the New York Times expose on taxes. You remember all of the women who have basically accused him of sexual assault. You've also seen him insult people, not only, his competitors on the political stage, but also just reporters. He's acting in a very unprecedented fashion, and I don't think middle America likes that. I think it's just really, he's a New Yorker. I got it. They can be interesting, and sometimes it's a breath of fresh air, but I think people have grown tired of it, and they would prefer to see someone who's got a nicer style to it, and that's one of the reasons why. And that where there's smoke, there's fire.
Joe, do you have any comments? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the comments that he's making about the president are probably true. At the same time, I don't care about how he appears on the world stage. I don't care whether the allies like him or not. I do care about whether or not they pay their dues to NATO. I do care whether or not they screw the American workers in terms of trade. I'm not going to sleep with the guy. All I want to do is see policies that he enacts that makes a difference. And I know that everything that's happened positive with the economy was all done by Barack Obama, and he has been very good for some black people, 4 of them in particular. I mean, they have a really nice house now up on Martha's Vineyard. That's certainly an improvement, at least for 4 of them. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, I do not see the Democrats doing anything different than they have ever done before. They can't do anything different. The Republicans, if this guy gets reelected as the president, I can see a lot of pressure to reformulate how the Republican Party operates. And if it doesn't do that, I could see a push, to create almost a third party that is more populist based. Because the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of things that Trump has enacted that he doesn't talk about. Like for instance, at the debate, wasn't it interesting listening to the debate when he's asked a direct question, what have you done for African Americans? He doesn't mention the increase in wages. He doesn't mention the decrease in unemployment. He doesn't mention letting people out of prison. Why? Well, because that ain't popular with some of his backers. So he's got to be careful about what he says, in the same way that the Democrats have to be very, very supportive of their peace-loving demonstrators that run around burning people's businesses. And that's okay, because that's just Trump's fault, because he provokes them. And Antifa is an idea. It's not an order. Come on, give me a break. I mean, they should have prepped him better. But he can't remember things for that long a period of time. And that's disturbing. When we have some sort of summit, what are they going to do if the Russian president turns to Biden and asks him a question? Take a 5-minute break for someone to write down what the hell he's supposed to say? And that's a problem.
Joe, I'm Okay, sorry, I'm going to ask you to wrap up because there's a few questions I want to answer. I am going to encourage you to start your own podcast or your own radio show, and I would absolutely tune in and listen. But let me at this point then jump in if I can. There's a question, I'm going to try to paraphrase it quickly, but someone wants to know about the possible shift in foreign policy if the Democrats get into office, especially Middle East, Syria, and Turkey. So would the Democrats, do you think, be pulling troops from Iraq and Syria? Pat?
I have no idea. That's unclear to me. You know, one thing I would say, though, that Joe was talking about when he says the Democrats, one thing that's very interesting is the Democrats are a very broad crew. And I think the thing is Joe Biden is considered to be a moderate, as is his running mate, Kamala. And I think the thing is that it's not the same thing as if you're talking to Elizabeth Warren or you're talking with Bernie Sanders or you're talking with AOC. So he's actually pushed back, that is Biden, on some of those bad things that the Democrats are actually almost encouraging, you know, looting and stuff like that. I mean, I agree with Joe on you have to protect people and businesses from being damaged by rioters. People who are protesting peacefully, that's fine under the Constitution. Great. But if you start burning things and breaking into, you know, stores and stuff like that, that's just rioting. That's not the right thing. And I think that Joe Biden has basically taken a stand saying, listen, I'm not for defunding the police. I don't think he's going to be defunding the Defense Department. I don't think he's going to be doing the radical things that you've heard from a lot of the people on the far left of the Democratic Party. So they're not all the same. It's not a monolithic entity. And I think that that's one of the reassuring things about Biden is basically he's already pushed back on those people on the left. And in fact, you heard him during the debate with the president say, listen, I'm the guy who decides what the Democratic Party is going to do. Bernie Sanders didn't win. I beat him. So I'm going to be the guy who's going to basically do it the way I want to do it, which is not going way left.
I don't think he's strong enough to do that. I really don't believe that he has the ability to do that. I'm sure that Bernie Sanders is a little bit frustrated about the fact that he sits down to make a deal with this guy, and the deal only lasts apparently about 3 or 4 months before it falls apart. The fact of the matter is that young people, okay, so they're always interested in trying new ideas and this, that, and the other thing. I have a son that's in college now, and as best I can tell, since the kids haven't figured out a way of engaging in sexual activity from 6 feet away, they have just basically abandoned any concern about the COVID virus. And the Democrats just want to keep the pressure up until Election Day so that they can keep the economy as bad as it possibly can be. The fact of the matter is the Democrats' position is that it's okay to have peaceful protests in the streets without masks, but you can't go to church, okay? I can't get into my church unless I get there by a certain time because of the limitations on seating, okay? And there's some churches that can't operate at all, but that's bad. It's bad to go to church, you know, it's bad to have your kids go to school. If anybody thinks that children are learning even a third of what they used to learn when they were in classrooms by this ridiculous remote schooling thing, they're out of their minds. And then here's the final point that I think that you hear all the time from Democrats. I hear it's very disturbing to me. You'll hear Democrats saying, well, you know, with respect to the working man, you know, there's no reason why, you know, picking up on Hillary Clinton's idea that a guy who was digging coal in a mine in West Virginia can't be taught to program a computer. Now, that's ridiculous, okay? This country has been built on people who are allowed to work any way they want to. They can work with their brains, they can work with their hands and that kind of thing. The arrogance that is coming out from the Democratic policymakers about retraining people who don't want to be retrained is really shocking. And eventually is going to be their demise.
We have 2 more questions I want to get to really quick, so please try to answer them quickly. And since you got on COVID here briefly, Joe, I'll just say one question someone has is, COVID goes for 6 more months. Who do you feel better having as president, Biden or Trump? Pat, I'll let you go first, and then please limit your answer to like 15 seconds.
Biden.
Okay, that was awesome. That was 3 seconds, not even. Joe?
Listen, Biden listens to the scientists. He listens to the scientists that say what he wants to hear, right? And the same way that Trump listens to scientists that he wants to hear. So the answer that they're going to do what the scientists want is ridiculous. Now, let me ask you this question. If 10% of the people in the United States have been exposed to this virus, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to sit around in our homes, never leave our homes, keep all of our businesses closed, and that kind of thing until what? Until some sort of drug comes along that can inoculate people against the virus. That's just silly. Because if Trump is in power, then we're going to have to listen to that woman from California talking about the fact, oh, it's not a detainable thing, it's all politics and this, that, and the other thing. So we're going to be in the same position that we're in now. The fact of the matter is that our country has to keep going. We have to feed our children. We have to educate our children. And having a whole bunch of teachers unions that are concerned about going into a classroom is a shame. Get other teachers that are willing to go in the classroom. Bye-bye.
I hear you. Yep. Okay. Last question then. Someone asked was about our electoral college and how free they are to vote as they see fit, or if there's a lot of influence or pressure in how they're voting. Maybe, Pat, do you want to just give a high level of electoral college? And by the way, just so everybody knows, in the last election, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but she didn't win the electoral college. So Pat, if you could briefly explain maybe popular vote, electoral college, and then answer the question.
Sure, Mark, thanks. So the electoral college, and we do not have a popular vote winner take all in the United States. And in fact, that's probably a good thing. And the design was intended to basically give each state a certain number of electoral votes based on the amount of population that they have. So California and New York have very large electoral votes. Smaller states like Rhode Island and North Dakota, which don't have a lot of people, have significantly lower amounts. So the thing is, if you win a state, if you win the popular vote in California, you get all of California's electoral votes. If you win, that's how it, and you have actually electors who come in and vote for the person whom they think is the appropriate person. Normally, that's supposed to be the person who won the popular vote in that particular state. Supreme Court had a case last year regarding, or actually this year, I guess, the electors who actually chose to vote for someone else, and in fact ruled that a state can actually sanction an elector. They don't have the right to go ahead and vote for whom they want, regardless of whoever won the vote in their particular state. Anyway, that's a good overview of what's going on in the Electoral College, and so it's meant to basically make it so that large states like California and New York don't necessarily dictate the result of the election. And in fact, you're right about Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote in 2016 by 2.8 million votes. But she ran up the vote in California, won by 4.1 million votes over Trump. And then she also won by about 1.5 million votes in New York and about 500,000 in New Jersey. So over 5 million votes plus, and across the rest of the 47 states, she lost a lot of that. And that's how Trump ended up winning the Electoral College vote, 304 to something like 220. But it was a very, very, very close election, and only about 80,000 votes in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, were the difference. And Trump won all of those. So that's how he became the president over Hillary Clinton. And that's how it works coming up. It could be actually similar again if, in fact, Trump shows surprising, gets support. And it maybe if there are a lot of Joe Klocks out there, then in fact he will win.
Mark, if I may, before this thing ends, I wanted to say this, just so those that are listening know this. If Joe Biden wins the White House and you have a client that has an interest in having their position lobbied in the White House, you guys need to see Pat. He's very articulate, he's very well thought of, and he's very, very supportive of Biden. So, and I think it's very important to know that in our system, you need to know who to talk to get things done. That's just the way it works.
I'm sure Pat appreciates the
Thank
vote
you,
of
Joe.
confidence, and yeah, exactly. And maybe there'll be a referral feedback said in jest. Maybe he'll invite you. Maybe Pat will invite you to a dinner with him and Hunter Biden. That would be the great way to say thank you.
I'll bring my stash.
Nice. Okay, good. All right. I think on that note, we're out of time. I want to thank everyone for participating in the webinar. Joe, thank you so much for your input and your words of wisdom. Pat, thank you so much for your insight as well. You guys were awesome. And have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.
Started calling you Dan.